fan of worst lists, and that's because I kind of feel like it's picking on not just a movie, but on those that like the movie. Now, some of you, I'm sure, are like, wait a minute, Grace, I have seen you rip a movie to shreds. And to that I would say, well, that's my review of the film. But when you put something on a worst list, you're kind of branding it, right? You're like, oh, no, it's not just me that has a problem with this movie. It's society. So why did I make one? Well, I made a worst list. And I have to say, I was able to come up with 5 worst movies for the year easily. But the other reason I did it was because a lot of you were very eager to vote for your 5 worst movies of the year. And for the first time ever, that was part of Beyond the Trailer's annual poll. So we're going to split the list. I'm going to contribute 5, and you guys are going to contribute 5. And we had a little bit of crossover. All right, so the 5th worst movie of the year, and for me, I have to do it as Suicide Squad. And you guys know that I'm very supportive of DC, the DCEU. I'm as supportive of the DCEU as you can be, I think, before you cross over into like blind fan allegiance, And also when it comes to Suicide Squad, I was one of the, top cheerleaders of that movie before it hit theaters, before I saw it. But, as I've said before, it's not a movie. It's Snapchat, the movie. Now, it gets an A+++ for branding and marketing and character design. But when it comes to actually storytelling, it's just so bad. It's got horrible dialogue. It has no 3-act story structure, which is the basics when it comes to screenwriting, okay? It has no character development, no action. It's full of plot holes. Now, I know that some of you, as you always do, are defending the movie saying, hey, David Ayer only had 6 freaking weeks to write that movie. What do you expect? Well, I don't know why anybody would put that kind of restriction on someone who's like, it just shows how little Hollywood these days values the screenplay, right? They're like, it's like the least important thing when it should be the most important. And then also, even with just 6 weeks, a professional screenwriter can write a movie in less than that time. A professional screenwriter can write out a movie in 4 weeks, I would say, and then has 2 weeks for rewrites. So I respect that maybe that's not David Ayer's process, but Warner Brothers should have realized that. And no matter what his process is, it should have turned out better than it did as a script. It's just horrible. Okay. I apologize to those of you who like Suicide Squad. All right. So my 4th worst movie of the year is Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's like the death throes of Johnny Depp, full of colorful makeup and facial hair, right? It's tough to watch at this point, and I feel awfully bad for Fantastic Beasts. I don't know why they cast him. It's so crazy. It's not like Johnny Depp was starting to turn bad, right? He's rotten at this point. He is just like a moldy tomato, speaking of Rotten Tomatoes, just sitting there. It's got a worm in it. Even the worm is leaving. It's like, I don't want anything to do with this. It's so embarrassing. So the fact that he could sign himself to a brand new franchise in a pivotal role, I don't know what to say. Right? Warner Brothers, again, this is you making these decisions. My other problem with Alice Through the Looking Glass is that I feel it's Feminism, the movie. And I think that Linda Wolverton is really out of control, especially after what she did to Maleficent, right? Which is weird, because she did a really good job with the first Alice, although a lot of people had problems with the feminism in that movie. And then also she, of course, famously, she's infamous now, but she famously wrote Beauty and the Beast, the animated version, which was quite good. And so on top of all that, not only is she out of control with promoting feminism, wait till you see how feminism factors into your list of the worst movies of the year, and it's kind of sad that, a cheesecake character like Harley Quinn, who is, the antithesis of feminism, is so popular. So anyway, well, that's a whole other discussion. But anyway, the fact that Linda Wolverton doesn't seem to understand three-act story structure for this script, for Alice Through the Looking Glass, I don't even know what to say. Again, is it like studio notes maybe? I don't know what the heck happened. It's really bad. Then my 3rd worst movie of the year is Now You See Me Too, which I have to tell you did incredibly well at the Chinese box office, as it should, because it totally sucked up to China. They shot most of the film in Macau on location, but the weird thing is that you would never guess they were actually in China. It always seems like they're on a set, or it's like Canada substituting for China. It's just really, it's one of the worst uses of an exotic location I've ever seen. It's like weird that they shot some Macau scenes in Skyfall, where it's stunning. And then you think about how it looks in Now You See Me Too, and you're like, that's so weird. Why would you guys pay to shoot there if you're not going to use it? Also, John Chu, I don't know how this guy keeps getting work. He's almost like the Akiva Goldsman of Hollywood at this point. Again, as we've discussed before, maybe he's good in a room. Maybe he's a really sweet guy. Maybe it sounds good, but I don't understand. No matter how sweet he is, or no matter how good his pitch is, once he leaves the room and the spell is broken, just take a look at the movies he's made in the past and their box office numbers, and you should be like, yeah, why don't you just come to my party this weekend, John? Because you're so awesome, but I don't want you to make my movie. Also, what's also very egregious about Now You See Me Too is that the first movie was so good and so clever. Ed Solomon wrote both films, so I'm guessing that Boaz Yakin and Edward Ricoeur, and Boaz Yakin has worked a lot in Hollywood. He's never really broken through to being a huge name, but he's one of those guys who has a good career. But anyway, those two guys came up with the story for the first Now You See Me, so clearly they were pretty imperative to writing the script. Then my runner-up worst movie of the year is Zoolander 2. And man, I am also angry at that movie because it made me look ridiculous because it had such a good trailer. And remember, I was like, oh, Deadpool better watch out. I think Zoolander 2 is going to be pretty strong. How was I to know that it was an unwatchable film? Just absolutely horrible. I mean, wow. I mean, talk about like supporting your team or picking, like I felt like I was at the racetrack and I bet a lot of money on a horse. And then the thing, not only did it not do well, it like came a few feet out of the gate, farted, and like fell on its face. And I'm just like, that's really bad. Also, it wasn't even funny. The movie wasn't funny either, besides being unwatchable from like a narrative perspective. And I think there was a good lesson here. And that's it. The first Zoolander was a cult hit, and the media loved it. And I think a lot of people in Hollywood loved the first Zoolander. But you know who didn't love the first Zoolander? General audiences, all right? It didn't make that much money. And it hasn't made that much money since. I mean, it still continues to win over new people, but I think that this is a good example of beware the hype. And I think everybody kept asking Ben Stiller, when are you going to make Zoolander 2? But he was kind of like in a weird Hollywood bubble where it was not what the whole rest of the world wanted, right? It was just like what a certain type of person wanted. And I have to say, having sat through the movie, high fashion jokes just don't have a lot of play, right? I mean, talk about a limited audience. And then my worst movie of the year is Batman the Killing Joke. And I actually wish this movie had never been made. I hate that movie so much. And I feel bad that I have two DC movies on here. But Batman v Superman was on my top 10 list for the year. I really like that movie. But Batman the Killing Joke, like first off, who makes The Killing Joke, the iconic comic by Alan Moore? Who makes it boring and also not the main focus of the film or the animated adaptation, right? That's so ridiculous. But then again, who could look away from the train wreck, which was the prologue that they tacked onto the front of the movie, which claims to be edgy and promoting girl power. And by the way, I don't know who decided that being sexy and owning your sexiness was empowering, right? Because sometimes being really sexy and inappropriate also leads to victimization, bad life choices, objectification. I mean, they're separate. They're separate. I'm so tired of people. I'm like, why does Catwoman have her cat suit zipped down all the way to her navel? And getting the answer back, because she's empowered and she owns her body and her sexuality. And I'm like, it just seems to me, like she doesn't have enough support up there and no one's going to be looking at her face and taking her seriously as a cat burglar and an anti-hero in the DC universe. It's just so annoying. I just can't take it. And to see that mentality bleed into stories that I watch is really annoying. I also don't appreciate the commentary that Batgirl sucked as a character because she wasn't sexy enough, right? They're like, Barbara Gordon's okay, and I like Batgirl, but you know what? She's just not sexy. Wouldn't it be better if she were sexy? We talk about starlets falling for this all the time. Anne Hathaway, Emma Stone, all ruin their careers in the pursuit of sexiness. Margot Robbie, of course, wants to have their careers. Not everybody can be everything, right? We'll see if Margot Robbie maybe can pull it off. I like Margot Robbie. But I just think that Batgirl was a great character the way she was, and she didn't need to do the things that they made her do I think quite appallingly, in Batman the Killing Joke. So Batman the Killing Joke is boring, sexist, and shallow, but worst of all, it doesn't understand the iconic source material. All right, so those are my 5 worst movies of the year. Now let's take a look at your list. As you can see, we have some crossover. We both picked Alice and Suicide Squad, and I think it should tell you something, that even though it was close, Suicide Squad actually beat out Batman v Superman for your worst movie of the year. And I say that because a lot of people took a hit out on Batman v Superman. For a lot of people, for some reason, Batman v Superman was personal. And with Suicide Squad, I didn't feel the hate as strong for Suicide Squad, So the fact that people, I guess maybe it's just like a private, maybe it's just a fact. Maybe people are like, it's not debatable with Suicide Squad, but there's still some kind of debate going on with Batman v Superman. So I was pretty surprised. I thought Batman v Superman would be number 1, again, because people took that film so personally in terms of hating it. But it couldn't top Suicide Squad. Then, though, Gods of Egypt, as you might recall from my review, I thought that film was like a good afternoon picture. But you guys really hated it. And I think that speaks to the shift that's happened where people are just not going to take whitewashing anymore. And I think you have a number of movies coming up that are going to suffer the same thing. I think Silence suffered from the same problem. And I think the upcoming The Great Wall is in trouble for the same problem. And I think that people just not going to put up with it anymore. And that's really interesting. And I wonder how long, you would think that after Gods of Egypt, none of those other movies would have happened. But Hollywood, they're learning pretty fast, but there are still a couple of casualties left. Then, with both Ghostbusters and Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think that's a real pushback on forced feminism, And I know that some of you are I just knew when I said the Harley Quinn comment about sexiness, that a number of you would be like, it's empowering. She's like, so she owns her sexiness. She's not ashamed of her body, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, we're talking about a character who's famous for being someone's girlfriend, and doesn't have any superpowers. And the only reason everyone on the team pays attention to her is because she's hot, and she actually doesn't have anything to contribute. It's not like, everyone paid attention to her because she was hot, but then she surprised them with her great strategy and great jokes. It's like, no, she continued to have that be the only thing going for her. Now, in her defense, she's a super hot character, and I can understand the appeal. And she's a fun character. But it's really a step in the wrong direction when it comes to female characters. I'm much more excited for the female characters of 2017, to be honest with you. However, but with Ghostbusters and Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think that was where feminism, again, rubbed people the wrong way. And I think that, thank goodness, they did reshoots for Rogue One, or I think it could have maybe ended up in the same category, in the same position. So I think it's very interesting, the movies that you guys chose as your worst. I'm curious to hear what you think of my choices for worst movies of the year. This was an unusually candid discussion, so I'm excited to hear your feedback down below. All right, thanks for talking movies with me, and you can check out some more videos right now.